Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last workshop of IDL National Camp Training. This is about feminism. So what we're actually going to deal with today is what is feminism, and then what is the history of feminism, why do we need feminism, and then why we essentially need gradual changes, and what are the gradual changes that have been made by feminism, followed by what are the needs of feminism. So basically, the idea is like why feminism and why we need feminism and what are the needs of feminism is kind of similar, but then I'll just club all of the needs together so that when you're making arguments and when you're justifying something, it'll help you. But then next is something called as intersectional feminism, and then how do we solve it? So essentially, intersectional feminism is not a problem, but there's so much intersectionality that is existing that you need some amount of like balancing power to make sure that everything is balanced and like everybody's needs are actually being fulfilled, which is actually a contradictory statement because you essentially cannot please everyone at the same time. Then going ahead, we would talk about feminist actor. But the good thing about today's session is it's more about discussion, less about theory, because I think like the theory about it is small, but the application about it is really vast. But before I move to the next slide, I want your understanding of what you think feminism is, as to like how you have perceived it, how you have understood about it through a third person perspective, or like whatever you have heard about it. Just go on.
Obviously, I've heard that it's like fighting for women's rights.
Okay.
Equality that's
I,
like
I think like one of the major criticism that feminism faces is that it's very like anti-man, which is extremely untrue, right? Because feminism doesn't only like just like strives for women's rights, but it also tackles so many issues regarding masculinity and toxic masculinity, which essentially also deal with men. But they're also not like limited to that. Like feminism is so much about equality of all genders, including trans, whether that be cis women, cis men, or transgender people. So like it's more about like breaking down the gender norms that belong for each gender and like the expectations of the societal norms, and more about like creating new like diversity regarding what we expect from a person just based on their gender.
That's a very good explanation. Anything else? If not, we'll just move forward. So I have like given you three definitions, which is more or less similar. It's just about like the application of it. So the first says feminism is a range of socio-political movements and ideologies that aim to define and establish the political, economic, personal, and social equality of sexes. Now, just like focus on the two terms which are in blue and tell me what do you understand by the like why do you think it's not singular and it says ideologies in this definition?
Okay, so socio-political movements and ideologies is that they're like very contrasting ideologies in terms of what feminism stands for, in terms of like what they aim to do. Like, do they aim to like achieve these things in the economic sphere? Do they want to like, for example, like that's what debates are about, right? Should like in the economic sphere, should there be like quotas for women, or should there be like more payment for women, something like that? Like that's like the ideologies, that there are vast differences that ultimately want to lead to an outcome of the equality of the sexes.
Any other guesses? So let me just like tell you like what ideologies actually mean. Is that feminism is just an umbrella term, because it actually makes sure to actually cater to a lot more ideology, but there are also like different types of ideologies within feminism. So for example, black feminism, liberal feminism, radical feminism, ecofeminism. But the basic understanding is that they try to find out the cause of the problems as to why women are being oppressed, and as to why essentially women and men should be treated equal. So they try to just justify it, but in different ways. But then next thing then is about equality of sexes. What do you understand as to like why is it not singular, but it talks about sexes?
because there are many of them.
Okay, like the genders, yes. Sex, yes. Okay, cool. I think like insofar as like the equality of sexes is concerned, you essentially not only like take into consideration the biological sex, but also like the fact that like there are many genders that are available. At this point, I think feminism is not just about gender like females, but it's also about gender minorities. And therefore we need to take like take care that these people are also like treated equally in the social and like all these spheres. The second definition then is the advocacy of women's right on the basis of equality of sexes. Same thing, but I think it's more about like advocacy and like women's rights and stuff like that. But it's just like more or less them. The next thing then is about feminism can be seen as a movement to put an end to sexism, sexist exploitation, and oppression, and to achieve full gender equality in law and in practice. There's a little bit difference here, and the difference that is existing is like it tries to tell you the problem and what should be the solution. The problem here is obviously sexism, sexual exploitation, oppression, and everything. Can anyone give me an example of sexual exploitation and what could it look like?
The people that have come forward with their different sexes not getting equal rights when people get to know about them.
So like somewhere around like somewhere around like discrimination of sexes.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
I think exploitation can be in many terms. Firstly, in terms of like harassments, they're like gender minorities are extremely harassed and like and they don't even get the swear to come out and talk about it, and if they talk about it, they're highly stigmatized. But exploitation is also in a lot of like public sphere, such as economic sphere, where they don't like have enough opportunities for jobs. Like if they go for a job interview, the first question they'll be asked, oh, like, are you getting to get married soon? So that's like the exploitation in that center, but also exploitation in terms of domestically, that how like they're expected to like do more domestic labor, and they're expected to like cater to the children, like that terms of exploitation, not be like subjected to education, etc.
I think fair enough. The idea is that any exploitation that happens to you based on your sex is sexist exploitation. I think there is like a common idea in the society, and misogyny obviously exists, and therefore like exploitation exists. The fact that like women are considered as vulnerable actors, and therefore it's easier to go ahead and exploit them, also is one of the like perception that exists in the society, and therefore like a lot of like crimes against them and everything happens. I think obviously it includes harassment, it includes like assault and everything, but we'll be talking about it later. Cool. Then what is the history of feminism? The reason why I just want to quickly go over it is because I want to tell you, I want you to like appreciate the idea as to like how the needs of women have been changing and how there has been a gradual shift towards, let's say, more liberal rights, as opposed to like this basic rights that women actually need. But obviously, like the fact that I wanted to tell you one more thing is that like the roots are there, like the roots of feminism, the fact that like, oh, women should be empowered and everything was present like in the 17th century, like 17th century itself. However, you get the first book which is actually being written by a woman is Rights of Women. And then the one more thing that I wanted to tell you about is like, oh, like the history is all about like how men actually wrote it, because most of the men had the ability to write. They were educated enough because the education access was with them. But then secondly, like they were authors, they were scientists, because like obviously there was so much stigma attached to like women entering into like STEM subjects in the first place, because obviously they used to think that women aren't rational enough to go ahead and like have access to science, access to the rational subjects, or the more logical subjects and stuff like that. And therefore, like history is literally bombarded with the perspective of what men think about females, or what men think about like the entire world. Which is why I think there's a book that is written. I think something about from the perspective of Sita, and it's really beautiful. Like it's a very beautiful like book as well. It's like something, I'm not sure which, but I think like it's a feminist opinion on a book. And that's what like makes things, and that's changed everything, right? Because essentially everything was from the perspective of men. Like they never thought that women can have a perspective, or even if women have perspective, it shouldn't essentially be given enough attention and stuff like that. But then the thing that I want you to like appreciate is the four waves of feminism that are existing. But I also want to tell you that like these waves have not existed in the way that I have written. So for example, 19th century to 20th century, they are not actually like uniform. Because if first wave in America came in 19th century, it's not necessary that it came exactly in India the exact same time. But that's actually a very like a coincidence that happened, was that I think the women's right first were recognized in 1914 somewhere, the right to vote. And then obviously India was getting independent, so we were actually like taking different parts of like other constitution from different nations, and therefore we obviously adapted the idea of like universal adult franchise, and therefore we also had adapted the idea that women should have the right to vote. That's a different story. But the fact is that if first wave is happening in America in 19th century, it is not necessary that like other developing nations were also on the same page, because the way how global sociology works is very different. Like the way how like females consciousness actually arose was also different in different places, right? So in the 19th century to early 20th century, you had suffrage for women, voting rights, meaning the beginning of political equality, because initially vote like the fact that like women weren't necessarily able to vote was, can you just like give me a random guess as to why do you think women weren't allowed to vote?
They thought that we didn't have enough knowledge about like who's the
Yes,
best.
that was one of the reasons. Yes. Others?
Their opinions did not matter to the men.
Yes. Another reason why?
They were like prefer to be kept at home, like not being sent out to do their jobs and anything.
Correct. Yes. Anything else? The most annoying reason is that they felt that if they're going to, so firstly, like there are two like very annoying reasons according to me. One is that they felt that like women would be distracted when they would go out and vote. Distracted from what? Like taking care of their family and taking care of their children, which is their like primary job. The second was that the idea of politics is so corrupted that we don't want the minds of female getting corrupted and like involved into that. Both of them make no sense to me, and that was the rationale that was being given to like women since like so long till like 19th century. I'm just surprised that.
Also, when Napoleon came and like subjected women again to like the status of minors in terms of like not only just voting, but like for even like doing anything, they have to gain the consent of their fathers or their husbands, using the rationale that firstly, women's minds aren't strong enough, and secondly, also using like typical gender stereotypes that men are stronger and women are more fragile, so women have to like be on in the shadow of men in order to be protected from the rest of the world.
I mean, that's like something which most of the religions also like try to portray, and that's again bad. But yeah, so that's what, so that was the reason, and therefore women gained the consciousness that look, we should fight for our rights, and we should be able to like choose who is our political leader. Moving on to the second wave then, which was mid 19th to end of 19th century, where people started talking about more liberal stuff like sexuality, reproductive rights, right to like basically whether you want to give birth to a baby or not. So birth control, the importance of birth control, because back then it was okay for you to have 10 kids altogether. Back then it was like literally being like the kings used to reward people who would have more kids, essentially because like more kids means more human resource, more people to fight for wars and stuff like that, right? So that was the idea, but also the fact that like nobody cared about like what is the health of a woman, like a woman in the first place. So that's when people also started realizing, things like birth control should be introduced. They also talked about social equality and criticized the idea of patriarchy, capitalism, heteronormativity. The idea of heteronormativity is basically that the fact that everybody assumes that heterosexual is the normal, meaning that like it's the fact that like of like a female should always like a male and a male should always like a female used to exist, right? And now the fact that like feminism essentially appreciated the idea that's not about like genders per se, it's not about just like okay, a man is always supposed to marry a woman. It's also about the love that exists between like say two people from the same sex. So it shouldn't essentially matter as to what sex people are belonging to, but it's also normal to have like same-sex marriages and stuff like that. And then the idea of like gender roles and how gender roles essentially should not exist. Can anyone tell me like a basic like example of what gender roles and what you understand by gender roles?
The most common gender role is that women should stay at home while men go out and get a job.
Correct. Yes. So they essentially wanted to stop that idea that, like, you know what, it's not that always, it shouldn't be always the case that like women are supposed to stay at home and men are supposed to go and be the breadwinner of the family. And then again, they also highlighted how differences were created biologically and culturally, like how, you know, like the fact that like we have been justifying oppression of women by saying that, oh, biologically it's true that females are weaker, or saying that, oh, like different cultures have their own like ways to approach it, like through religion and all of that, to just like justify that, oh, it's okay for you to go ahead and oppress women. And that's how what was highlighted in the second wave. The third wave then was about more about the expansion of civil rights, but also against gender exploitation, I think harassment, and then also embrace the idea of femininity. Initially, I think there's a slight difference in the second wave and the third wave. So initially they were like, you know what, the fact that like you always appreciate, like you always expect women to dress well, dress in a certain way, which is appeasing to men, or which is appeasing to the society in general, so that you look beautiful. Basically, the idea of heels, the idea of like lipstick, the idea of like makeup and everything is basically a thing that you like treat women as objects. So that was the fact in second wave. The third wave essentially was about you embracing the idea that, you know, there's something called as femininity, and like it's okay to have those feminine not it's okay, but then embrace the idea that like, look, you know, like using lipstick is fine if insofar as you like it, or like, you know, like being dressed in a certain way is nice because you like it, and that's what like makes women like makes women a women and something like that. So, and then also like female sexuality and the fact that they should be able to embrace that as well. And then you have something called as intersectional feminism, which I would be explaining later. But then they also realize there's different class, different race, and different class of people face different kinds of problems, and that's something which was only in the third wave which they realized. The fourth wave, and it's still going on, is when the social media and internet tools were introduced. That's when they started using it as a tool for pushing forward the idea of feminism and like movement as such. And then they talked about equal pay, they talked about higher education, higher jobs, position of powers for women, basically getting these managerial positions. And then they also started challenging the idea of misogyny, workspace harassment, and also obviously the Me Too movement also came into picture. Then going on, why feminism and why do we need it? The first reason why we need feminism is that there exists historical oppression, meaning like the fact that like women have been continuously oppressed by different ways of justifying it. As I already told you, religion was one of the ways, culture was one of the ways. Scientists came up with this discovery that not discovery per se, but then they came up with this full explanation as to how females are less like powerful than males because of genetics, because of testosterone levels and all of that. But also the inherent factor that was like just imbibed into the men, that like, you know, you are the breadwinner and you are the protectors of the family, and therefore you are superior than women, and women are essentially more emotional, more fragile, and they're supposed to nurture and give birth to babies and take care of them. Again, like a lot of crimes started happening against women. And I'm going to have this discussion in a bit about why crimes against women are extremely high in numbers. But like going on in the flow, I think like things like these things existed, right? Like more power means more wives, and polygamy also existed. Then you had religion, which used to justify, you know, oppression of women, when you like, and also like justify the fact that women are supposed to be kept in closed doors, saying that, oh, men being protectors of women, or saying like, and you know, the instance of Draupadi and everything. But then there's also something called as, you know, men are more rational and they have more capability to handle, let's say, things like land or property, and therefore things like property rights never exist for females, and therefore, you know, like then they went ahead and like talk, like, you know, even if females had the right to access property, the males used to control as to how the property is going to be used, right? So yes.
It was like to blame, because see, religion, the rules that were made, see, I agree somewhat with the point that, you know, there's different like bodies of men and women, so then that prevents women from doing certain stuff and men from certain stuff, right? But and that was what was put in religious books, that, you know, it was just for the benefit of women, right? That they shouldn't exert themselves to the extent that, you know, the both of them are equal. But then what our society did was they created much more they turned this data, they twisted it and made it so that women are actually losing from this.
Yes, yes. So I don't say religion in of itself is bad. I think the interpreters, I don't know, that word of religion are bad. Like the people who had the ability to interpret it. So like obviously they were men and they were able to like manipulate it in a way that, oh, this is what the religion actually means. And therefore, as a philosophical or like a body which is so powerful, you shouldn't essentially like dissent from that. So I think that's the idea which I was wanting to like portray. Cool. Then moving on, I think crimes against women are essentially extremely high because they are seen as vulnerable actors. Then going on, you have men made those rules, and I already told you that men made those rules, men interpreted them, and they use it to a leeway to oppress women in a way that it would establish superiority, even though they had no logic. And I think I've already told you, things like no capability to vote, and I have given you the reasoning as to why they did not have the capability to vote. They were seen as mentally inferior, but also they did not have the capability to get educated. And can you imagine what is the reason for that? Is basically that, the more a person is going to study, like a female, then it's going to corrupt their mind. But secondly, it's going to also make them infertile somehow. And that was the reasoning that was being used to tell that, women cannot go ahead and get educated. But starting with this, why do you think crime against women are in huge numbers? And you can take instances of India as well.
Because like they are known to like they think that people think that they're weak, easy
Hmm.
targets.
I think not only like the fact that they're considered weak, but also like general hatred towards women, because most of the harassment that actually like happens against women is like so by misogynist people. Like they're just like they see women as these objects that could be like used for their personal benefits and then just like be expelled, or like they do it out of pure spite. It's just like doing something just because of pure hatred and pure spite, and like just considering them object, not human beings. People will never do that with another man, or they'll never do it just they'll never disrespect some other man because they consider that person like as a human being. Like it's like not even treating women as people.
I remembered one part of I think Roman history when they were talking about like they were like, oh, you know what, we won't give rights to so females were equated to slaves, and slaves did not get the right to vote, and then females also did not get the right to vote. So that was the equation that they were actually making. Others, what do you all think? Why crimes against women are in huge numbers?
Why were women treated as slaves that time?
Not necessarily, but like if you like basically the equation is that the slaves, so even though they were men and they were slaves, they did not have the right to vote. And what the rulers that time said was that, slaves and women should not have the right to vote. So do you see the equation that like people who are slaves and are necessarily like working as servants and getting exploited are essentially as like oppressed as women during that time?
I think another reason for why crimes against women are in huge numbers is mainly that there is still a lot of stigma attached to like when a woman talks about being harassed or some sort, and people tend to like, especially in like a misogynistic atmosphere, they tend to believe the man more than the woman. So they don't even believe that the crime has taken place in the first place. So then this man gets like a sense of security that they can just get away with crime.
Very good.
And then there's also like embracing your femininity, because a lot of times it's like now it's like this new it's just like this thing like being okay, fine, we won't hate if you're a woman, but we'll hate if you're a woman and you're feminine, because being feminine is being weak. And like when women embrace this femininity and actually like try to like, it's okay being feminine no matter what gender you are, like it's okay like liking pink, it's okay wearing a lipstick, and like whenever like women do that, not essentially in crimes, but also it plays a huge part in like what women are wearing. um that's used as an excuse, or like the attire was too inappropriate, the entire attire was like something that wasn't just that they were like subjugating themselves to the harm.
That's true. I mean, like, can you imagine the fact that like lipstick, the entire idea or concept of lipstick is also like equated to things like not being solicited enough, and that's what they do. Like, oh, you know what, being feminine in of itself is bad. Anything else? Do you think it's all
Yeah.
about women? Huh?
Also, like women are thought to be like less educated, not very well educated. Like people believe that.
So you think that the crimes against them are more because they're uneducated and therefore they can be
Yeah.
easily exploited?
Because people think that they'll be easy targets because like they don't have enough knowledge to like stop this. But men will be harder targets because like they have knowledge that this might happen to them, which I think is entirely wrong.
I don't think this is wrong because see, initially like women weren't even given the right to like go for to get education, right? So then now it's not exactly their fault that they don't have information or they weren't told about all of this. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. It does happen, but it's not anyone's fault that it didn't happen.
I mean, it is the fault of men that females were not getting educated.
Previous like before age men when they made these laws that women can't get education.
Who made those laws?
Men.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Do you think like laws essentially aren't that strict to prevent crimes against women? Or are they even recognized? Things like marital rape isn't even recognized. I think it's now a little.
Can you repeat?
I was saying, do you think laws aren't strict enough to prevent crimes against women?
Yeah, because people escape from doing that. Like the man who murdered his own partner living in this house.
Oh,
What?
you heard that case, huh?
He got away like for 6 months. How? How did like, the police not react to her FIR?
Anything else? Do you think awareness? So we have covered most of what like women, but like let's also think about like the other side, like what men think, or like awareness about it, or let's say just like a basic socialization of men, basically telling them that look, you're superior enough. I mean, I won't essentially know just by being a man that I'm supposed to be superior and I'm supposed to be oppressive. It has been taught to me. I have seen it happening and therefore I'm doing it.
Yeah, I think this time like the quote which says it like your company is what makes you like what determines your personality, right?
Also, in terms of like how normalized it is, like for example, like domestic violence in so many households, there's like so much domestic violence, and like men, like sons, like growing up, they see this, they're subjugated to like how women are so inferior, and thus it's okay for them to harass them, or okay to them subject them to violence, because there's an inherent normalization attached to it.
Fair enough. So moving on, um, why essentially we need gradual changes. So I think it's less about why we need gradual changes, more about what are the gradual changes that feminism has made. So things like right to vote, equality, no gender discrimination, and then moving on to jobs for women. So when women got the jobs and the opportunities of job, they asked for it's I think like it's not in the order properly, but I think to own property was obviously before equality, and then they came up with the idea of equal pay. So the moment when they got jobs, they were like, oh, we need equal pay as well, because even though we're working like equally, but we're not getting equally paid. And then you had crimes against women, so they started like questioning the yes, Navya.
I don't think that equality or no gender discrimination has still been like it's not been achieved yet.
Correct. Yes, it hasn't, but like the fight has been started like long ago.
Yeah, the entire point of feminism was, I think, was
Yeah.
So it was the goal, but it hasn't been achieved yet.
Yeah. So it hasn't been achieved. Like I won't say even I can't even give you a quantity of that, but I think it hasn't been achieved, and has to have like it has to be achieved in gradually through changes is what my point is. But then like what people started realizing needed to be changed is this slide. Moving on, they asked for equal pay, workspace equality. Workspace equality and equal pay is a little different, because equal pay is when you ask for equal money for like, equal payment for the equal work that you do. But workspace equality is more about like being discriminated in terms of when it is about promotion and everything. Then going on, you have crime against women, because there was so much oppression happening, harassment, rape, assault, everything. And then there's something called as rape culture, where you justify and essentially victimize the criminal itself, and you say that, oh, it's okay because like, oh, it's something like the woman was probably bad, like wrong because of what she was wearing, when what was the time and everything. So you essentially justify the idea, and that's called rape culture. And then you have something called as providing voice to the marginalized. So like by this time, people realize that, like what, the people who are actually able to talk about let's say feminism are the people who had some amount of like power or some amount of capital. So essentially it was started by middle class white women. However, like it obviously like was channelized to other people as well. However, the voice of the people who were the oppressed of the oppressed were necessarily not heard. Meaning, let's say the African American in America was never heard, or let's say Muslim women in India was never heard. So there are different ways how you can see it. So providing voice to the marginalized community and coming out of the oppressive structure. So like, like if a particular thing happens to a minority woman and she doesn't have agents, she has been like oppressed by the majority, she has been oppressed by the males, basically a lot of oppression, which means that she doesn't have voice to go ahead and like, like call out the structures of oppressive structures. And therefore they realize that we need to give some amount of voice to these marginalized people in the first place, so that they can give the first-hand experience and tell what's wrong and what are the actual problems that they're facing. Because it shouldn't always be the case that, upper or the creamy layer is like just like justifying or like telling that, okay, this is what is happening to us, because everybody essentially is facing problems. And then moving on, they realize that, what, we should also get education, we should have access, and we should also have access to higher education. And therefore, when you get higher education, the ability of you to get better jobs is also increasing. Moving on, you had positions of power. So when they got higher education, they had more capability, and they started asking for position of powers, being president or being manager, being CEO of a company. All of it was something which started like happening, and they started asking for it. It's still a problem though, like this one is like a very big problem. Obviously, like a lot of it is like a very big problem still. I'm just telling you that like the consciousness of what has actually come. Then they start coming up with marriage equality, the fact that love is love. So even if it's same sex, it should be considered and recognized by the society. Then you have something called as birth control. So birth, and then you started coming up with the idea of privacy, choice, agency. So this privacy, choice, and agency is something which they have started very like, they have started giving more importance to it now. Can anyone give me one example of privacy and choice in India as to what's happening? Like it's a very like famous thing that is happening. Have you all heard about the hijab case?
In which the college is like allowed not like did not allow girls to wear their like hijabs in exams.
Yes.
Yeah, I heard about it.
Yes. So the difference is that in India, people are asking for having the choice to wear hijab. In Middle Eastern nations, people are asking, the females are asking that they don't want to wear hijab because it's a forced choice that's being, not forced choice at all. It's just forced on them. It's coerced that you're supposed to wear it, right? But in India, so the basic idea is that you should be able to give the woman the choice of what she wants to do. Whether she wants to wear hijab, let her do. If she doesn't want to wear hijab, don't force it on her, because you're nobody to tell or you're nobody to give take away that autonomy of body from her, because she should be able to do what she wants to. But secondly, I think there's a one very good, very like huge thing that is happening in terms of abortion, because in America, people want abortion to be legalized. However, it is not. And that is one of the things called as bodily autonomy, meaning women should be able to exercise whether they want to give birth to a baby, whether they want to actually like go through the pain of giving birth to a baby. It's a very, very huge task. And therefore the choice of who should be able to make that choice should be of the women. But I want to, so it's not actually gradual changes, but the assumption is that gradually we should be able to achieve those things. But let's talk about what you feel about gradual versus radical changes. Can anyone give me an example of radical change, or like just tell me what radical changes are?
Basically like sudden changes that happen instantly, or like during over a short period of time.
Hmm. Fair enough. So what do you think? So if you had to say that, feminism should go ahead and give like push for gradual changes, or should feminism should go ahead like, or should they go ahead and push for radical changes? So let's talk about gradual first and then favor it.
I would say gradual changes favoring would probably be that feminism is about changing people's mindsets about sort of like what women are um, allowed to do in quotation marks. Um, and obviously changing mindset, it just doesn't happen suddenly, right? You need to change the entire thought process of people. That takes time. So you need to have action that takes time throughout a few years, throughout maybe a few decades to help achieve this. And obviously brainwashing for the right cause, right? You're trying to show them the reality that women are not lesser than men.
Hmm. Anything else? Think you can go on for anything though, like favor against anything.
Wait, what's the question?
It's about like whether feminists should go forward and push for gradual changes, or whether we should go forward and push forward for radical changes.
Another point can be that gradual changes like mainly involve, okay, so like for example, feminism has a lot of goals as such, right? And they've been like prioritized over the years. Like gradual changes like lead to like a prioritization of goals. So for example, first feminists talked about basic rights like political equality, and then they went on to workplace safety and etc etc. So it's like we can't just take all of these goals and achieve them in a short period of time, because that is not possible. Gradual changes ensure that they're like done one at a time in a way.
I think one thing for the opposition then is that if we're talking about gradual changes, I think we should talk about the women quota bill in the legislature that's still been pending for like a lot of years. So gradual changes, sure, might come in 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, but they're still going to like impact so many in the present, right? In the present, so many women are being subjected to not having their basic right. We don't have enough representation of women. We don't even have enough power. And I think those are something that are needed now. Yeah, sure, we can expect in like another 50 years they might get it and that be like a good ideological change. But I think ideological change can come in 10 years, can come in 50 years. I think what we want more is impact. That's going to help women, right? So like that impact is something that why they should push for radical changes.
Hmm.
But I think then the question becomes like, what is which side is better for like women, and which side like lasts longer for women, right? So for example, if we talk about the change being quick, then yes, like a large number of people will not get oppressed and victimized like in the short run. But also, since you're not essentially like changing their mindset, or like kind of like unlearning all of the things that have been brainwashed, that you've been like brainwashed for over the years, people will think that feminism is kind of a forced thing that is being like just like forced upon them, and rather than actually thinking that it's something that women actually deserve. So in the like long run, it might not be as beneficial for women.
Okay, if we're
So
talking
the
about,
fact that, just a second.
yeah.
So the fact that like people, the fact that like radical changes exist, people have started having misconceptions about feminism because of those radical changes. Like the same thing that Priyanshi already, like earlier told, right? That feminism is against man per se or men per se, right? So the misconceptions essentially like exist because you are like pushed forward for changes so quickly that people are not even ready for that.
So
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so then I think something that opposition could possibly say is that firstly, yeah, we agree that ideological changes are going to come over a long period of time, but are we ready to make the trade-off between ideological changes and the severe impact that it has on the status quo on women, right? So if we're ready to make that trade-off, if they have a particularly bad ideology over women, that can change over 10 years or like 5 months. Based on the basis of education, on the basis of enough representation, on the basis of actually understanding, on the basis of more gender neutral courses in our school. But I think the impact then on the real world has to be uh, based on women, like women empowerment. So I think like even in our worst case, even in opposition's worst case, we're ready to make that trade-off of ideological differences for the good impact that's going to have on women.
Also, I feel like you can also link it back to a revolution and how most of the revolutions were essentially initially considered as radical, but these were the like times when people were actually able to make a change, like French Revolution, like the kind of things like liberty, equality, fraternity, all of it came into picture because it was radical in nature. Anything else? I want
One
something for the opposition now.
No, one thing for the proposition that I thought of against my own rebuttal could possibly be that radical changes don't last very long. Because that could be something like they could say that, okay, like the radical changes that are being made, they might lead to a lot of ideological gap. And this ideological gap could essentially lead to like counter revolutions and counter actions, and this could be like this could like just lead to like entirety of feminism falling in a very unstable conditions for women, because they're still going to be objectified, they're still going to objectify women, there's still going to be like um hatred towards women.
Yeah. I think but like one thing on opposition that you can say is that I think proposition is trying to assume the fact that all goals are supposed to be like going to be achieved and in one day, but that's not the case, right? So if feminism is asking for, let's say even if they are asking for one goal, the radical idea is that like if you want it right now, you cannot like drag it for years, but you're supposed to get it as of now. So even if you're asking for let's say braless movement, you're supposed to ask it for now. Like people have to change their perception about it right now.
the thing is that people might change the perception, but it takes time for you to still accept it and get it normalized in society, right? That still takes time. Your ideology, like your thinking process, might change for
The rebuttal to that is basically sure, but what would happen with radical change is that it will become a law, right? So when something becomes a law, essentially, like it's not always the case that all laws are like heavily appreciated in the one, like in the get-go. A lot of laws like are adapted to by in some time, but at least like this law is essentially going to give some redressal mechanism to this person who is being oppressed. At least in After the House, even if like the change of perception happens later, at least we have a redressal mechanism for them.
even then, like people right now, there's a law that you can't drink if you're under 16 or 18, but doesn't stop people from still abusing it, right? People can still find loopholes in that. They still ship stuff illegally,
But
and
then that is like irrespective in both the sides. Like it would happen in your side, like the proposition as well.
no, but in proposition, you're changing the mindset. If you convince everyone till the extent that nobody thinks that drinking is bad, for example.
No, I think like, drinking shouldn't be the analogy here because like drinking is like different than committing a crime. I mean, like drinking in an age is obviously is a crime, but like the actual like cognizable offense of like you harming somebody else is a different crime, and therefore like the there is like a different story there. Okay, so I think like it's easier on proposition is what you guys think. Cool. Moving forward then. Present needs. And what are the present needs? And I think it's all obviously like inclusive of the last needs, which aren't essentially properly like um achieved till now, but like these are the things which are actually being asked as of now. Maternity leaves when you actually basically like paid leaves for women, when it comes to you going ahead and being able to give birth to a baby, pre when you like basically give birth, pre that, during that, and after that, and also some part of it when you're actually nurturing the baby. And then there's something called as abortion laws. I think I've already told you. Hijab, right to choice. Then you have women in managerial and leadership positions. They're asking for quotas in these managerial positions. And then you have more access to daycares because working women essentially need it. I think in India we have very less daycares. And then you have menstrual hygiene, sanitary like napkins, and being able to have the access to that. A lot of people don't have the access to that, and therefore the hygiene part of it, like a lot of like people get sick because of it, because they essentially use the conventional modes of it. And then you have cyber crimes essentially happening against women. A lot of them are online, and therefore the kind of crimes also that are existing against women is also changing. And therefore we need some of the laws being reformed according to that. Then you have reaching to the marginalized communities, being able to give them the voice, specifically to villages in India, because they need awareness. Because, you know, even if you have like some right being given, and that's important because what Navya was saying makes sense, right? Because if you are going to have rights and these laws simply exist, and people don't even know these laws exist, or people don't even know they need these laws, it's essentially counterproductive, right? Because even if you have given a right to a woman, but she doesn't know these rights exist, but these rights aren't necessarily being executed well, there's no point of these rights. So women in like villages essentially get oppressed because they don't even know that they can like raise their voice against it, and therefore it's problematic. Then you have religious reforms, basically like a lot of like Christian, and I think that's why Christianity becomes the most relevant as of today, is because like they have reformed the religion to a very huge extent. They have tried to make sure that they're actually like going ahead and being able to incorporate things like feminism and things like LGBTQI community, which is also happening in like a very gradual manner. But we should actually be able to liberalize religion. But you want to give me a brief understanding as to why do you think? But we have a like discussion later, so I'll give you the chance next. But there's something called as intersectional feminism. So what intersectional feminism is that there are different ways how each woman experiences discrimination. So there's something called as white feminism, which means that like feminism that shadows the struggles of women of color and LGBTQ like women and women of other minority group face. Basically, the people who are privileged enough and they have the voice, they have the capital, they have the political capital, and therefore they're able to tell their struggles. However, a person who comes from LGBTQ community, the person who comes from minority community, their face essentially gets overshadowed when such people exist. This is what intersectionality means, and this is what intersectionality means, because people are facing different forms of discrimination, and their kind of discrimination is even worse than what happens to, let's say, a privileged women. Not saying that the privileged women does not get exploited enough, but it's basically like the levels and degrees of exploitation that exist. Then you have people have privilege and they become the face of the movement. Their struggles are different than other women. A lot of backlash happens specifically when like, let's say, you know, a person from a higher class women going ahead and telling that her struggles of like how she was bullied in class and all of that, as opposed to a woman who is from lower class, because they can't essentially relate with each other. My struggles are different from your struggles, and therefore like the voice of the oppressed never gets heard. And this is the problem that exists with respect to it. So how do you essentially solve it? And that's how I have given you an example as to a working women in city will have different struggles and problems as opposed to a rural women, because obviously you don't have like different basically have different um understanding. Then you have how to solve it is basically common women problem. Basically, even though you are different and you come from different classes, etc., they are basically you try to solve the basic problems and the most urgent problems and prioritize the goals of it. So like basically there should be something which is common, and therefore you go ahead and try to solve them. But why do you think the needs of a Dalit women in India are different from women a white woman in America?
A huge factor is the environment. India is a developing country, and America is a little more developed and a little more advanced as compared to us, as compared to the mindset of the locals and the mindset of the people around you.
I think like the social and culture plays a very important role in this. Like from the moment that they're born, right? Especially if the Dalit woman is born in rural India, the most probable thing is that they'll be like killed on spot, right? Because girl child killing, especially for Dalit women in rural areas, is a very, very prevalent, which is something obviously a white woman won't have to face. And in terms of education also, um the Dalit woman is less likely to actually firstly get education, or even if they do get education, they're less likely to have it for a very long period of time. And even if they do get it for a very long period of time, the education is more likely to be very like not really good education, or not the kind of education like they could make a career upon. But
Hmm.
a white woman is more likely to actually like get basic rights such as education in America, and also get like fine quality of education, and also like the opportunities that present women after they're educated. A Dalit woman firstly is more likely to be uh subject to a lot of social discrimination in terms of both being a woman and being a Dalit, and also like in terms of uh, marriage, like how their life is like so dependent on marriage. And then the work that they do, the domestic work that they do, is going to be like so much far of worse. It's not going to be the one that upper caste women in rural areas are going to be doing either. The domestic work that they're expected to do, and also like the harassment that they have to face in village, is going to be so much worse, and they're like way more less likely to call that harassment out because they're a Dalit woman. They're like they're a really huge minority.
Also, like Dalit women have like less what do you call that? Less things like work with in their like childhood. So like they can like in the future they are like more easier, like they can do with less resources. They don't like they're not totally dependent on something. They are like free. If you give them this much, they will put that to whole use and it will like fulfill their needs. And like white women in America, they need everything. We can also not imagine living like the rural women of Dalit in the rural areas. It's hard for them, but they learn how to adapt. So like
Hmm.
they live in very hard conditions.
So basically, they've accepted their hard conditions.
Yeah, basically, like I think it adds on to what Priyanshi said about like the type of quality of education which they get. The other women would probably like not even be aware about feminism, about all of these rights which they have. They don't even know that, that we can vote, we can step out of our house without men objecting, right? They don't even know that this is a possibility, let alone it be becoming a normal, right? So now obviously if they're not aware that this solution exists, or this that they should fight for it, they're not likely to do it anyways. And
Hmm.
because of the prejudice they already face, they're not going to want to hurt their social status even more because they're scared about what others might say if they start even if they are aware about like all of these changes, they're not going to they're not gonna protest against it or anything of the sort because they're already facing so much discrimination. They're not going to want more, right?
Hmm. Correct. Cool. There's something called as wait. Hmm. This house, as feminist movement, would actively reject celebrity feminism. What do you all think about it?
Could you like define what celebrity feminism is?
Could I define?
Celebrity, yeah, go on.
So, celebrity feminism is basically when the celebrities are put into the spotlight and made as like the faces of feminism. So,
Hmm.
means that if you're famous or if you're like, if you're popular, then only people notice your plight. They don't notice it otherwise.
Hmm. So
Yes,
what do you think? Why is it bad?
proposition would obviously be like the most oppressed of the oppressed. Those people are, like we mentioned before, the needs are completely different, right? The one we just did, the needs are completely different to the ones what celebrities face. Celebrities feminism would probably be that they're not getting equal pay as men actors, whereas normal like basic women of middle class or lower class social status, they're not even getting jobs, leave apart equal pay, right? So they're not the basic all of the points that we mentioned for the previous sort of like needs for Dalit women versus American women, that probably applies here also, I think.
Okay, why do you think that their voices are being suppressed? Like, why? Like, they are not saying that, you know what, as a person from lower class, you cannot go ahead and talk. So, what's the problem there?
The voices are being suppressed because the richer people, the more popular people, they are the ones, like the more famous people, they are the ones taking the spotlight for this case, where in fact the spotlight should be directed at the people who are suffering day to day, not for someone. Lots of times these are just sympathy traps or a way to reel the audience in, right? This is all just a show. But what we have to really shed light on is the lives of daily civilians suffering every day, daily females who are suffering on a daily basis.
Fair enough. Anything else?
I think there are like two things that pan out, right? Firstly, there are people who think that celebrity feminism is extremely petty, right? Like, oh, they're showing that these are their problems. Oh, like there are worse of problems in the world to be taken care of. Like, they don't get enough attention, or like that isn't like a valid problem to deal with. Like, that's like ideologically how like the world perceives these celebrity feminism. But also, secondly, so they can gain this inherent like thing toward feminism, or feminism is like this high class cis white woman that isn't supposed to be dealt with. Like they don't like understand like the depth of feminism. But also secondly, let's say they buy into this celeb no way, I was saying something. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so let's say like they understand the celebrity feminism, these ideologies, and then they're more likely to like just like negate and overshadow um other sort of like, because like we prioritize, right? We're not saying that the lives of these celebrities and the discrimination that they face isn't important, but maybe the discrimination faced by a Dalit woman in rural India is way more important to be dealt with, because
So,
it's like
the
their
yeah.
basic rights.
Yes, go on.
No, yeah, that's it.
Okay, so like give me more reasonings as to why like they're going to overshadow it. It's like taking away spotlight and everything is fine, but there's some reason that I'm missing here that you need to
Because
fill it.
also the low class, I mentioned this before, so they don't have enough opportunity. They don't know that these things are stuff that we can go against. They have accepted this as societal normal, right? They
Yeah,
don't.
so even if you reject it, they wouldn't have opportunity either. Like how does it give them opportunity some like suddenly? That's the thing that I want you to answer. So the reason why they have less opportunity is that media attention is very limited. So the fact that celebrity feminism exists looks like basically an actress going ahead and like on news media platforms, so like in general like news media shows and everything, they're going to go ahead and like have the spotlight and be there on the chair, meaning people cannot simply keep listening to feminism all day, meaning what are they more likely to listen to is probably an actress going ahead and talking about it. If that is the case, it essentially takes away the actual discourse that is probably happening somewhere else. Meaning, you take away the traction, you take away the attention span of a person from, let's say, the people who actually need it, as opposed to the people who are, let's say, on the news media channel, who have the political attention, who have the social attention, who have the uh, economical attention, simply because have that capability. They are rich people, and therefore it's bad because they essentially, it comes to a cost of not listening to them because of a media attention, b the capital that exists with these people, and see the discourse cannot essentially keep happening like 24 hours. Like you have to prioritize. Let's say if there's like there are two channels which are talking about it. One is talking about like an actress, one is talking about the actual person who is like for like facing something. Not saying that celebrities don't face something, but like the basic of the basic things that they don't have. People are more likely to go to the actress because it seems more entertaining to people, and that's problematic. Cool. Opposition then, what would you say?
I think something that the opposition can say is that in the proposition, they're kind of assuming that all of these celebrities, in the end, they like, in a way, they come from money and they have money as a reason. Like, so like they are elite by nature. For example, like celebrities like Adele, they have actually like risen through the classes, and they have actually like experienced feminism on so many different levels of classes, and they've seen how women are treated in like different places and in different classes as well. So they're like, they can also kind of like actively talk about feminism and about like the basic needs that some women are not getting.
Sure, fair enough. Anything else?
You can also say that first of all, feminism is not something that like a lot of people want to hear about day to day. So the fact that they're even listening to it is actually a big step. That they're willingly listening to what is happening, so that can still change their mindset little by little. Gradually, it can improve, right? So while this is still like the beginning step, it still should be widely accepted, right? Because people are willingly talking about it, they're listening to it, and this will still cause like a change in their ideology, their mental perception of what feminism is.
Anything else? I think we talked a lot about like the capital that these people have, the resources that these people have. Don't you think they have the fact that they have this much resources, they have the capability to change?
Change in what sense?
Change in policy, change in like getting influence, because they have social capital. So because let's say I love Taylor Swift and I saw her on a channel and she was talking about feminism, I'm more likely to hear her. I'm more likely to opt into the feminist movement.
It's not that depends from celebrity to celebrity. Like Kanye West, he has a lot of opportunities, right? And he's done stuff about it. He's talked about his stance, which is not necessarily what the public wants to hear. It's not what the public is agreeing with, and he's
No,
still.
that's the rebuttal to it. However, most people are likely to listen to you because you have influence on their mind, like a lot of celebrities. And I'm talking specifically about women celebrities. So if they exist, and as a woman, I know that I've gone through the same problems in terms of relatability, I'm still more likely to listen to her and, like understand that, oh, feminism is a thing that I should opt into.
Yeah, that's true. I do think that celebrities garner like a lot of attention, because someone who just some random person on social media who says maybe white lives matter versus what Kanye West says. If he says white lives matter, people are more likely to listen to Kanye West than another stranger on. So it does garner more attention, but then they also face more criticism for it, right?
True.
If Kanye West,
Yeah, so that could also be like an argument that you can use on opposition, saying that like they're more likely to like choose their words in a way which is not essentially going against the intersectionality. So, for example, I can't necessarily say that, what, as um a white feminist, I feel like I have undergone the worst of worst. Is something which like the black feminists essentially are going to call me out for. So I'm never going to like undermine others' problems. I'm just going to show that, okay, my problems exist, but I'm never going to undermine others' problem, is what I'm saying, because essentially you would face a lot of backlash then.
yeah, exactly. So they're not going to like actively keep protesting about something which, even if they have faced something, like Nishka said about Adele, if she said that you're oppressed of the oppressed, but now that she's a celebrity, she has different problems, which she won't exactly go out and say that, when I was early on, I was oppressed to more extent, and so these people face more of a problem than others, right? She can't really go against and say that, because they care about their social reputation, their body image, right?
Also, like I feel like the fact that even though like some voices are not being heard, that doesn't mean like you should also suppress her voice, simply because that even if you take away her voice, I'm unsure as to how many people would want to listen, like even would know that this person there from a lower class person is like typing something on her Instagram. Basically, the amount of people who follow you and the social capital that these people have. So if I post something on Instagram, it's going to have less traction as opposed to a celebrity posting it. Basically, like the impact that these people create. So even if the change is small, it's still good enough, and it still changes something, which is again good. However, I had one more point that I wanted to talk to you about, and it was something about like the first point, I mean, we haven't like very like little. We have touched it upon very like little, but I think the idea that like celebrities are also intersectional, right? So celebrities are also black women. Like black women can go ahead and talk about like the problems that she has faced in the industry itself. Like, you know, as a black woman, how my problems were in terms of, you know, competing with other white women. So it can still exist. So intersectionality in terms of feminists still exist.
It still exists, but to a lower scale.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Now tell me, what would the common ground look like? As in, sure, we understand both of them have different um, choices, both of them think about differently, they have different needs, but what could be the common ground between both of them? Because as a feminist movement, you would want to prioritize some goals over the other. So what would the common ground look like?
Yeah, that feminism is important, women's rights is what basically like both of them are fighting for, right? It might be in different ways, but the fact that women need prioritization and then actively need to talk about it, that's common.
Okay, what else? Like if you had to like prioritize, let's say we both have different opinions, and then we have to prioritize either of our opinions. How would you prioritize? Because let's say my priority is that I want um menstrual hygiene products, and your priority is that you want, I mean, in general, you need equal pay. How do you prioritize?
So you're saying which one's considered more important out of the two?
So then you would consider as to which one is more important, obviously.
I think menstrual health will be more important in this scenario, because only if there are people, if women are able to like their well-being is fine, they're getting their bodies fine, they're feeling confident about themselves, will they be able to first of all work properly, as and then they can say that, you know, we're working equally as well as maybe if better compared, and so the work is still being getting done, maybe even better, so we should get
What else? Okay, I'll tell you what else. Okay. So how do we solve it? I have given common ground, solve the basic problem, the most urgent ones. So I just wanted to give you a brief map of what intersectionality looks like. So basically, this person comes from different ethnicity, gender, age, sexuality, disability, culture, class, religion, and the kind of oppression, the kind of discrimination that each person is going to get is going to be double fold. So for example, and even in these, you can like use the same thing, right? A person from minority religion plus lower class plus, let's say, is disabled is obviously going to face more problem than, let's say, of a higher class and higher religion, like a majority religion. So that's the problem. Like, you know, things like horizontal intersectionality, vertical intersectionality can still exist. So these people have different needs, different levels of oppressions, and then different interests. But at the end of the day, they are all fighting for women and gender minorities, fight against the patriarchy, evil of patriarchy. Then you can go ahead and prioritize as to what is the biggest evil as of now, and what needs immediate attention as of now. So but how you can essentially solve intersectionality is go ahead and have representation from different groups. So things like getting in like representation from, let's say, like a minority religion, minority class, minority culture, disabled people, basically that. So we need representation from different people so that they can speak for themselves, speak first-hand experiences. Then you have no hijacking of voice. So even if you're from a majority religion, you shouldn't be going ahead and like undermining the problems that a minority religion person is actually facing. So even if you have difference of interests, you shouldn't essentially undermine others, because essentially we're all women or gender minorities together, and we are supposed to like stand as a united front. Then you have common grounds like things like getting a job or being able able to study, health, all of these are things which impact everyone. And therefore, getting all of these things should be more important than others, like things which impact everybody equally, right? Because if you don't have job, if you don't have money, you can't sustain yourself. If you can't study, you can't get job. If you are not healthy, you can't sustain yourself as well. Again, and then drawbacks of achieving common goals. So even if you try to come to have common goals, the problem is that like the privileged women are obviously going to be able to manipulate it in their favor, but you're supposed to make sure that doesn't happen. How you're making sure, that is up to the model. But I think the fact is that you're supposed to make sure that it doesn't happen in the first place. And then obviously you can come up with intersectional policies in terms of which benefits all. Now, feminist movement as an actor. So feminist movement as an actor basically means that achieving basically what as feminist movement, or what as feminist, what you want. First is achieving basic equality for all sexes. That's something which I've already told you a lot of times. Second is having allies in the movement. Basically meaning that like a movement doesn't essentially like run in isolation. You essentially need support from other movements. So allies basically means that they're like actually have same kind of goals. They're trying to fight for against same thing. So LGBTQ community also is against the patriarchal structure as well, but they're obviously like fighting for equality of sexes, genders, etc. Against the idea of heteronormativity and everything. So they both are allies, and therefore you obviously, when you're taking a step, you wouldn't want to hurt the ally. You wouldn't want that like this policy shouldn't hurt and go ahead and hurt the ally, which is LGBTQI community. Then you have having buy-in. So buy-in basically means that you want more people to support and start understanding what your ideologies are. You want more people to support your movement. The reason why you need more people to support your movement is essentially because the more people support, the more lobbying power you get, the more voter base actually is under your umbrella, and therefore the changes that are going to happen in your side of the house are going to be better off. Meaning policy changes. Government is going to care about you more because more people have the same ideology. More people need that change. Therefore, if they don't essentially change the policies, essentially it's going to lead to, let's say, like overthrowing the government and protest against the government and stuff like that. Then you essentially want people to be aware of their rights, obviously, so that they can execute their rights, as I've already told you. Then you want to provide platform to the oppressed people. This can be useful in different motions with respect to intersectionality. Then obviously at the end of the day, you want to fight the evils of patriarchy. I think there are many evils, basically gender roles, basically masculinity, toxic masculinity, a lot of like things against men, like like crimes against men cannot exist. So I think feminism also talks about how patriarchy essentially impacts men, telling them that, look, you cannot cry, like making them like sound or seem very emotionally strong individuals, has essentially impacted them a lot. Then you have continuous change. So basically, like, the fact about any movement, specifically feminist movement, is that just because you have achieved one thing should not stop you from achieving more things. There are always like more things that you're supposed to solve. I think I think you've already told me this thing about, like, even though we have a list, we haven't achieved everything, and like basically everything in totality. We have to go on and like try to improve it and like have more access towards it and everything. But the last thing and the most important thing is that you want to have utility of the resources, meaning you obviously as a woman you would have limited funding, limited resources, and therefore you would want to spend it in a way which is the most like utilitarian for you, meaning like the kind of like returns that you're going to get. So obviously you wouldn't go ahead and like spend on a movement in a, let's say, in a place where you know that the changes or the perspective or the returns that you're going to get from the people is going to be negative, right? So you're supposed to like take baby steps in order to utilize that money and utilize it in a way which is not giving you a negative attraction, obviously, because it's basically like, oh, you losing out on the entire money that you actually have. Basically utilize in the way which is going to be the best for you. Next thing then we have is a lot of like discussion. I think there are three. One is about religion. This house believes that feminist movement should prioritize in its public agenda the narrative of reinterpretation of religion rather than narrative against religion. So what do you all think is the case for proposition?
A proposition can say that reinterpretation of religions is more acceptable to the people, and it's more likely to be accepted in the first place, because here you're not exactly going against religion or like any belief that people have, but rather you're just like reinterpreting it or making another meaning out of it.
What else? Why do you think it's more acceptable again, Nishka?
Mainly that, well, they're not exactly like going against something that people essentially like believe in or have been believing in for a very long time, because that like changing that mindset takes a lot of time, especially because like people have exactly like a strong faith in religion. But like reinterpretation might not take as much like time to change as such in like people's mind.
To add on to Nishka's point, I think to prove your point, you need to agree. See, people are not going to completely change their mindset just because you tell them to, right? You need to agree with them also. You need to show them that, yeah, you know, what you say also has merit. And so we're accepting it. We're accepting your point. But then we're also helping prove our point. So it helps better able to, it helps you better able to push forward the idea of feminism.
Correct. Why do you think we need to appease to religion per se? Why can't we just stop
It's
catering?
very widespread, right? People believe in it. People, for a lot of people, that's their daily is basically what keeps people going, right? It provides a sense of hope. Right. So you can't just deny people their you can't just deny people that the thing they fall back upon, right? They rely on religion for a lot of stuff. So you can't just remove that from their existence. They won't
Fair
accept
enough. Tell me another thing. Why do you think religion essentially, why are we actually talking about religion and feminism? Like, what is the common thing like, between both of them? Like,
I
why?
think
Yeah.
religion dictates a lot of rules and social norms that are followed relating to your gender norms, and that is why like a lot of people, like even say the hijab laws, or like your in Hinduism, like when women are on their periods, like rules like that further influence gender roles. So like for feminism has to have some sort of intervention in religion. It's like because they can't just go parallel to each other, right? So so like in which side do they get the best kind of interventions? Like like when they just like reinterpret religion, or when they actively go against religion.
Fair enough. So, if there is a demography of, let's say, liberals, moderates, and conservatives, who essentially is going to fall for you in this
Could
paradigm?
you repeat?
If there is a demography of liberals, moderates, and conservatives, who exactly is going to help your movement?
I think moderates, right? Because they're accepting both perspectives. They're not denying people the right to religion. They're not denying people the right to like equality.
Correct. So, do you think that religious people are never going to fall in either side of the house?
Religious people, if they start accepting that, you know, religion also caused what causes social mayhem, so if they still accept that this happened and now needs to be changed or look into, I think even then they can become moderates.
So basically, the idea is that moderates are obviously going to fall for you. But in your side, there is a possibility However, in their side of the house, conservatives are never going to go ahead and buy into feminism because essentially you're against the idea of religion. Cool. Now let's talk about the against and why you think we should essentially.
I think we can say that religion is what caused all of this, right? It was written in religious books that you know, women are not equal to men. They um, are not necessarily, you know, like they can't do the same thing men can. And then twisted this narrative, right, to make whatever thing that make whatever oppression that exists So there's no way we can come to like a common standpoint in which religion is also heard, because religion is basically the cause of gender inequality. So you can't.
Something about inefficient interpretation. Can you all think of? Do you think people would be this convinced by the interpretation? Don't you think they would feel that it's contradictory, meaning feminism is trying to prove that their religion is contradicting of itself?
I didn't understand the point.
Basically, let's take it this: if feminism essentially, no, if religion and the text says that women needs to be protected, and what could be the possible interpretation to that? Like, what could be the possible interpretation which proves it otherwise, that, you know what, females have the capability to protect themselves? So the point is that interpretation essentially is not going to give what feminism actually wants.
Yeah, I think that's true. Probably that if you reinterpret it, religion goes completely against the ideologies of feminism, right? If you start reinterpreting religion, it's not gonna lead you to what feminism is trying to push forward. So it's not gonna help the cause of feminism anyways.
Anything else? There is so much more that you can talk in this motion, though. Think. Which principle do you think it is going to be applicable here? Principle of integrity of movement. You, like, irrespective of whether you think that a lot of people are going to buy in or not, you still have to make sure the integrity of movement is still intact and you're not like conflicting to your own ideology.
Yeah, even though you know that the other side will probably like help you achieve feminism a bit faster because more people are accepting it. It goes completely against the idea of feminism. So you're not standing with what you believe in.
I think oftentimes and not, I think if conservatives like this, they would think that you're trying to corrupt the religious text by your liberal interpretation.
That's like full China perspective.
Okay, enough. Then what about this? This house believes that paternity leave should be equal to maternity leave. Do you know what it is? Paternity leave is like giving leave to a man, like a father, when it comes to them giving birth to a baby, as opposed to maternity. I think I've already.
Could you explain paternity leave again?
I couldn't hear you.
Could you repeat the definition for paternity leave?
So paternity leave is basically, let's say, if a man and woman, like, basically, if husband and wife are getting married, like are giving birth to a baby, essentially in the status you get the leave for the mother, but you don't get the leave for the father. Now, what you're saying, and even if the leave for father exists, it's very limited. It's very lesser than what females get. What they're saying is that we should give the paid leave equally to both father and mother.
Okay, so I think that feminism, there's like a very common misconception that that women are favored. So then, in order to like ensure that feminism is still something that people accept, and the only way in which it becomes widely accepted is if males accept it too, right? And they're not going to accept something that goes against their gender or that actively like oppresses them. So probably it's going to help propagate the idea that both of them are equal, and we're not trying to oppress one gender in order to promote.
I think one thing that opposition could say is that they could give the example of Haryana that recently gave equal paternity and maternity leaves. But what happened is there's still an ideological gap, right? The objective of paternity leave is that like men have the equal responsibility to help the child, right? However, what turned out to happen in Haryana is that these men used to like they didn't used to help or anything. They just used to be an extra liability on a woman who have just given birth. They just used to be like the woman had to feed them, the woman had to give into their demands, they had to like give them food, water, etc., because they're still like over superior, we're like the men. So like they went to these offices and say like they're being a super great liability right now. So that is why like the ideological difference still exists. So having paternity leave is not going to do anything regarding men having more stake in taking care of the child.
What else? Do y'all think, why do you think the fact that like only maternity leave existed, why do you think it was the case so?
So obviously, the physical load on the woman is much greater than what the man has to face, right? There's a physical burden which the woman can't exactly like work with that, right? She can't take care of a like a newborn child as well as work at the same time.
Okay. But using the same analysis, can't we say that like because women is their physical burden is a lot, they need somebody to take care of them, and therefore have basically men around them, basically a husband around them is probably a good help. Think.
The father will only act because he will also get a leave to look after the mother.
Yes.
Not be like he won't be able to focus at work because how is the mother doing? Like how is the child?
But wouldn't the second argument, which for proposition, be invalid considering the Haryana example, and which was saying that the men did not help at all? In fact, they were just adding extra load. So
True, but that Haryana is not the majority of example. I mean, Haryana is that because Haryana is Haryana. And no, I'm just kidding. I'm just saying that like the mentality of Haryana is different as opposed to other places of India. And therefore you cannot like generalize that, you know what, like just because like men in Haryana did it, it's going to be the case with everyone. I think I have seen men who are like being responsible enough and taking care of their babies as well. So
upper class people or middle class still. Low class
I
people.
think no, not necessarily. I think lower class people even in fact give more attention to their kids because that's the only thing that they have to like fall back to.
That, and then they'll fall back. They'll give attention to the kid if it's a boy child, if not if it's a girl
Yeah,
child.
that is true. Like the yeah, I mean it can go either ways, but like father will realize its responsibility is what I'm guessing, because like they would basically see um you know, the biggest problem with men is basically they're not stay at home, and they think that like women don't do anything at home, and they feel like they don't go through anything, like anything for that matter, right? So the moment they're going to stay home, they're more likely to like experience the first hand problems that females are going to get after like pregnancy, and therefore it's going to be like basically that they would realize, you know, that the problems that the basically the struggles of a women, and therefore would realize that, you know, um there should have been a helping hand to them. But I was coming to the point of gender roles. The fact that like gender roles existed, and which essentially led to, you know, like things like maternity and paternity leave essentially bad, right? Because you said that like you assume that like what is supposed to be done is essentially that, oh, females are supposed to take care of their children, so on and so forth. But nobody actually cared about like paternity leave, because people did not realize that like men need to take care of the children as well. That's why when you give them paternity leave, um it pushes the idea that you're supposed to also take care of their kids as well. And the gender roles is not like, oh, if you're a father, you're just supposed to earn money, but you're also supposed to take care of your family as well. Hmm. So let's just like move forward and do this one. Capitalism. It's interesting though. This house believes that capitalism does more harm than good for feminism. And you need to brainstorm for it a little bit and think of the. Do you remember in the international? Yes.
What's the interconnection between capitalism and feminism?
Yeah, there is a lot. So, do you remember the time when I told you that, you know, during World War, women got chances to get um, represented in workspace?
Yeah.
So how do you think it relates to capitalism? Capitalism essentially is private owned bodies, and the fact that capitalism exists is like several things. First is that, oh, they created a lot of jobs, they also innovated, and they also realized that they would need more workforce as force as opposed to just like men working. Therefore they also opened like channels for women to actually work. And therefore capitalism obviously does that thing being good. But secondly, even though the fact that capitalism is capitalism, and the structure of oppression, the structure of exploitation still exists, meaning the fact that they open jobs for women, but then they still used to like oppress them to an extent that they would pay them less and stuff like that. But also like it's easier to exploit a woman as opposed to a man, because obviously because like they're seen as vulnerable actors. They're also seen as people who can be easily exploited, right? So this is why capitalism relates to, you know, structure of oppression, being able to increase gender roles. The way how they increase gender roles is things like um, innovation. So for example, when you have a market like this whole cosmetic industry is based on capitalism, because they come up with different ways to go ahead and exploit women, like telling that, look, you need a full surgery of your face, or look, you need these many products to look good, look, you need to be fair. All of these things are like the products of capitalism, and therefore it impacts feminism in the way females essentially are being treated in the workspace, but also like they're seen more or less as objects of capitalism, because they see that, oh, if a problem for women does not exist, let's create a problem, tell them that this problem exists, and then tell them that, oh, you know what, you need to solve it, and then sell it to an extent that exploit them, and then, you know, like use them as resources. All of it also happens. So this is why capitalism relates to feminism. Till now, what could be the possible case for proposition?
Since profit, like capitalism, like mainly depends on like profit from the majority, can we say that like intersectional feminism might not really come into the picture of advertisements by capitalists, because like minority of women who might need a particular product might not exactly get it via capitalism, because capitalism would mainly like target the majority of women and telling them why they need a particular product instead.
Yeah, so like even if they've come up with, let's say, sanitary pads, the point is that they, oh, they know what they were trying to solve the problem, but the cost of sanitary pad was so much that like minority people could not even like access it, right? So yeah, your point stands true. One of the problems with capitalism is workspace harassment is because so it obviously asks everyone to work too much. And for you to be able to work and be able to get better salary is based on how much you can work and is based on hustle culture. Meaning you have higher stakes than men in order to be able to A, get better salary, B, get promotions. And therefore, they take it toward their leeway and use women as such resources, which can be utilized to an extent, and you can like exploit them to an extent simply because you think that they are going to do so because they want, like, say, higher jobs, higher salaries, etc. What else? Think Arna Rajput, Navya Agarwal, where are you guys? Priyanshi.
Still thinking.
Is it this difficult?
For the other motions, I'm not sure for this one.
Not really, but I was thinking along the lines of these arguments.
Hmm. Let's just move to the opposition then, if you think it is difficult on proposition. I did the most part and I've given you the explanation, so I did not speak. So why do you think it does some good, like something which is good? I can give you hints and then you can build up on those arguments. Then the fact that like jobs opportunities existed for women, and the fact that it did not exist in the beginning, it in and of itself is like a thing for feminism. So what do you think about that?
I'm not sure of this, but people are more likely to just buy a product. So, like a few people who now care about feminism, they're more likely to buy a product by someone who's by a person who is a woman, like a woman CEO.
Hmm.
But I think this also then means that people are falsely advertising, right? They can just put a picture of a woman and say, she says this. And so I'm not sure how to find out, but I mean,
Okay. Anything else? Think what capitalism does. Capitalism is like about innovation, development, It's also about profits. What do you guys think? Think on the lines of innovation. Think of how like movements have become easier. The fact that people innovated and came up with the idea of social media. Yeah, you were saying something, Nishka.
Yeah, I was just saying that capitalism also gives kind of like a financial independence to the woman, because now she has a job, and yes, there might be workplace harassment, but like um even in today's world, like financial dependence is something that like kind of influences the woman to not leave like her household even if she's like being domestically abused. So that is taken away when she's like independent and on her own.
Very good point. Anything else? Last, and then we'll go to principles and we'll get it like over with it. How do you think capitalism has essentially changed the way people have been thinking? For example, do you think MNCs coming into different nations has changed anything with respect to feminism?
People start respecting women also, that they can work equally.
So MNCs essentially come to nations and want obviously like different demography of people working there. But the fact that like not just like MNCs, we can talk about FDIs and like general investment from private entities happen on the fact that whether or not like the social capability or social like equality exists in a particular nation or not. So I will say that, oh, as of now, let's just keep it as that and go to the principles that are applicable on feminism. I've already told you one principle, just tell me which principle that.
Integrity to the movement.
Principle of equality.
Yes. What else? There is one thing that I told you, I think, in the principles debate itself, and we used that example a lot.
Principle of human rights and dignity.
Yes. What else? There's one more. A lot of times you would have to justify reformations. How would you say that it is justified?
Could you repeat that?
A lot of times you would have to justify reformations and say that, look, it is okay to tax men more than women, even if they have like more or less like income.
Maybe principle of reparations as well.
Yeah.
Like,
I think the 4 principles that I can think of as of now, and I think it makes sense. But that's largely it. That was what you needed to know. I didn't know this document became this long. But thank you so much. It was so amazing having this discussion with you all, specifically about feminism, because it's one of the things I